Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever or wherever you are in the world. My name is Mark Edwards, and this is the Channel Zone podcast. My guest in this episode is Yogesh Patel, Chief Growth Officer at Maintel, a UK-based communications specialist MSP, or an MSP plus. Yogesh has spent many years in leadership positions with the likes of OneTel, TalkTalk, and now at Maintel. That's impressive in and of itself, but I'm also keen to find out today a bit more about his early professional life and how he came to work within the telecoms and communications sector. Our paths crossed last year, courtesy of Mr. Stephen Bynan, who I worked with back when Stephen was at NTL Telewest and Virgin Media, and Stephen is now non-exec chair at Maintel. So we're keen to learn more about Yogesh and his views on modern selling. So, to the audience, let's buckle up and get started as I welcome Yogesh to the podcast. Yogesh, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Super, and thank you very much for taking time out today to join us. As I said there, I'm interested in how you got into the industry, because it's odd, our paths crossed last year. In some respects, I don't know, a sliding doors moment. They could have passed many years ago. We may even have passed in some corridors because we've frequented the same offices, I think, from time to time. But can you give the audience a little bit more insight into how you came into the telecoms and communications sector?
Of course. So I did the usual university, came out of university, struggling to find a job. Back then, I had aspirations to be an accountant. A good steady income, all of that good stuff.
Did you study accounting? Sorry, then what did you study?
I did professional exams. That's another story. That story would go on for a while. But yeah, I was looking for work, and I was through an agency offered an interview with a small cable company that was based in the Docklands in London. A company called Encom. So I went for the interview and I joined them as a trainee project accountant. Which I did probably for about 18 months or so. Did a couple of other roles in finance, was doing financial qualifications. And actually, it was my very last exam. I was waiting outside of the exam hall at Ali Pali to do my final exam. I looked in the exam hall and I thought, I'm done with this, and that was the end of my finance career.
Right.
So I didn't do the exam. I never finished my professional qualification. I had one more exam to do, and it was probably the one I was going to fail, actually. So there was probably an underlying tone there. So I stepped out of that, and then I've always been quite commercial, very good with numbers. I then started to work with sales teams on deal structuring. And bit by bit, I kind of moved into sales. The closer I got to it, the more I wanted the customer interaction. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in telecoms and technology. I kind of fell into it, if truth be told.
I think my guess is, Yogesh, I would say 99% of the sales people that I've spoken to over the last 30 years would probably say we fall into it. The other word I say is we fail into it in some respects. Just a slight change in the spelling, but we kind of, maybe we wanted to go down one path and we end up coming into it. Only once did I ever meet somebody who basically claimed that they wanted to be in sales even from an early age. But even then it wasn't they wanted to be in sales. They said they wanted to be a recruitment consultant, which I found even more astounding. But the reason, when he dug into it, yes, at the age of 12, he decided he wanted to get into recruitment. And you think, how is that possible? Well, there was a family barbecue, and this 12-year-old was there, and Uncle Ernie turns up in a big Mercedes Benz. Do you know what I mean? Comes out looking $1 million. And the kid basically says, what's Uncle Ernie do for a living? They said, he's a recruitment consultant. So the kid said, I want to be a recruitment consultant. So not to do with the job, but more to do with the rewards. Clearly, it was going to take you in that direction. So the shift from accounting, did you stay, because you said it was a cable company then, so did you remain within that cable business?
So I stayed within Encom, and then there was just constant acquisitions and mergers taking place.
Correct. So is this early 90s? What is this?
Yeah, early 90s, yeah. So it became Bell Cable Media. It then joined with Cable and Wireless to become Cable and Wireless Communications.
Yeah.
and then Virgin Media took them over. So I probably jumped 5 companies in the space of 6 years or something along that.
Got you. Yeah, I remember at one point, I think the whole cable industry was founded on the premise of there being these small regional franchises. There were about 40 or 50 of them. I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, that's exactly
That was the original proposition. And then they just bought one another up, didn't they, basically? It went from one to the other until eventually it was NTL and Telewest.
That's it.
And then those two came together, and then, let's say, Virgin. So we've seen huge amounts of change in that time. But that's it. So you started, you have to say, in many respects, at the beginning of your sales career, a bag carrying sales guy. I'm wondering as to whether you might gone and knocked on doors at some point in the distant past.
Yeah. I've done a bit of door knocking.
A bit of door knocking, collecting compliment slips or whatever it is that I used to do. But today, here you are, Chief Growth Officer. So I'm just going to dig a little on that one, because I speak to CSOs, Chief Sales Officers, Chief Revenue Officers, come across quite a lot now as well. But Chief Growth Officer, I think you're the only one, certainly on my books. I'm just intrigued as to, is there a specific subtlety or nuance to Chief Growth Officer to differentiate against Chief Sales Officer?
But between a CRO and a CGO, there's a little less different. Between the CSO and the other two, there's a bit more. So
yes.
If you take sales is part of growth, right? So, but you're just looking at the sales funnel into closing a deal. What I'm looking at is the end-to-end piece. So growth is a combination of selling and retaining. So on the retention side, where are customers at from a contract perspective? Where are they? What are their future aspirations? Are we going to be relevant to them? So it's constantly looking forward to make sure we can retain those revenue streams.
Yes.
Identify any risk, mitigate those risks, and so on. And from a sales perspective, it's always about trying to make sure you've got as many routes to market available to you. So, there's traditional, very, the old method of selling. We talked about door knocking, but it's all of it, right? It's the marketing funnel. It's using consultants. It's finding every route to market that you possibly can.
Yeah.
To try and find as many prospects within the verticals that you service.
Yeah.
So that you've always got a decent funnel to work with, because not all of the funnels ever going to mature into pipeline and so on and so forth. So It's making sure you've got a view of the whole end-to-end piece, really.
Yeah, got you. And the retention element to it, as you said, because the business is, as is most tech nowadays, heavily reliant on recurring revenues. So I think it's a fantastic element to the business. Saying that, you've probably, within telecoms, it's always been recurring revenues, isn't it? I mean, it is the monthly, quarterly bills.
Yeah,
it's how the business grows.
The challenge is, as technology matures, revenues naturally start to come down, margin starts to, as you get competitive pressure, margin starts to get tighter. So how do you keep reinventing yourself? How do you keep the proposition interesting? How do you make sure profitable, but try to foresee what the customer's going to want in 2 or 3 years' time when something new is coming out. So at the moment, everyone's talking about AI, right? So how do you monetize that so that while it's relatively fresh and it's not commoditized, there's margin to be made there.
Yeah.
So it's trying to keep that lens on it all the time.
No, it makes an awful lot of sense. As I said, as that new product or offering is coming in, there are other products and offerings kind of falling off the end. There's a kind of long tail. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. We all use our mobiles more than we ever did before, but mobile revenues have been substantially impacted over the years. Still profitable would be my guess.
Yeah, still profitable, but it's getting tough because there's not many new customers to go after anymore.
No.
So you're just poaching, and the only way you poach is by offering them more value, and that's normally a cheaper price.
Yeah, is that, or the incumbent messes things up and maybe forces the customer to go. But there's, let's say, opportunity there, but not quite what it was back in the day. This episode of the Channel's Own podcast is brought to you by In Connection, the trusted events agency to some of the biggest names in IT. In Connection knows that in today's fast-paced world, it's not just about delivering a return on your events investment. It's about delivering unforgettable experiences. Because some events fade within hours, while others become memories that are talked about for years. In Connection, the go-to event agency for the IT channel, creating memories that matter. So look, 2020, I hate to take you back to 2020. It's a horrifying period, really, if you think about it. The COVID lockdowns, you'll remember. So there was a huge shift. Probably March 2020, if we're going to be specific about it. Yeah, March, before it was the beginning of March 2020, businesses kind of went into lockdown. Hybrid working then kind of became the norm. My guess is at Maintel, maybe people were used to kind of home working to a degree, but I think it's changed dramatically since then. There's a lot of home working. That seems to be the preference. Sometimes for customers, they would prefer to deal with a salesperson virtually rather than in the same room, or spending they'd rather spend half an hour on a Zoom or Teams call than maybe an hour or an hour and a half in a face-to-face meeting. But I'm a big believer in face-to-face selling and proximity with the customer, and I'm just kind of interested in your thoughts on that. Would you agree with the shift has been, maybe we've gone too far into work from home?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think hybrid works, right. It really adds to the efficiency. You can get across more customers more frequently. However, you don't get that human interaction. You don't. Yeah, how many times have you been on a call, even with me probably, where you can see I'm reading an email or responding to an IM. They're not focused on the call. It's easier to get distracted. Whereas if you're face to face, I think you get insights that you typically wouldn't get on a Teams call. Teams calls are very matter of fact, whereas even in a preamble to a meeting, when you rock up for the meeting, you walk into the meeting room, how's life, what's going on, what's new. Yeah, there's so many little conversations that happen along the way. That can be so insightful. You may actually have traveled quite far to see a customer, and you may say, actually, do you mind if I just borrow a desk for a couple of hours so I can do some work before I head off? Even then, you might end up talking to people that you've never spoken to before.
Yes.
And you might gain some insight. So I think there are benefits to virtual meetings, but I think nothing beats. I think if I certainly look at the last I've been in this role now 3 years. I think my strongest relationships with customers are the customers that I've met face to face by a country mile.
Yes, no, definitely.
So it's really hard to articulate, but there is definite benefit in that face-to-face interaction.
I think what you say that about whether it's a customer visiting your site or you visiting a customer site, even the experience, as I said, you get a different perspective of an organisation parking in the car park, going through reception, and it depends, I suppose, where the meeting room is. But you may be taken into all sorts of parts of the premises, which you could say, kind of encourage certain types of conversation. And it said it gives, I think, it was a very, very different perspective. The virtual meeting is extraordinarily efficient, time efficient, cost effective, effectively free of charge.
Yeah.
And from the customer side as well, I often feel half an hour on Zoom or Teams is much easier to say yes to rather than somebody coming to visit them for an hour. And I've even seen, have you ever been to Vodafone's offices in Newbury?
Yeah, I have indeed.
Which is huge. If I remember rightly, even there's a visitor's car park, not a few visitors' spaces, there's a visitor's car park, and it's about 4 stories.
Yes.
So and even then, when I've been there, you can't get a meeting room. The place is just packed. So it is the way of the world, but and for many roles within a business, I think it's probably even the more appropriate. It makes an awful lot of sense. But for salespeople in particular, listen, it's not only the engagement with the customer face to face; it's being with salespeople. I mean, I remember the sales office circa 1986, far beyond, earlier than when you were. But you could smell the sales office. Do you know what I mean? There was the smell of coffee and cigarettes, stale cigarettes, and you could
And
hear
cologne
it.
probably.
And what?
And cologne probably. There you
The salesman's aftershave of choice, a little dash of this, and I could go and see a customer, and even after I left, Yogesh, there's a faint smell of me still in the air. They leave, and it's Mark Edwards, a little bit of Aramis. Although I'm a bit partial to Brute, by the way. So, anyway,
I also say one thing we didn't cover off. I think you build trust, which you cannot build on a
virtually,
I know the customers that I've met face to face, I can now drop them a text message and say, "Have you got 5 minutes for a call?" And it doesn't feel awkward. Whereas
yes,
if I did that with another customer, it doesn't feel like I've got
yes.
that relationship to be able to do that. So
Yeah. They're very efficient. You're generally on a half-hour call, you're pretty much straight into business, and they can finish on time. I think everybody's kind of become accustomed to that. But you don't get your 5-10 minutes of getting to learn to know one another, understanding a little bit more, and said the more personal stuff rather than anything else. So no, makes a lot of sense. Moving on, Yogesh. Sales teams, I'm saying here, often busy, lots of meetings, lots of calls. But busy doesn't always mean productive. So I've always felt that a strong account development plan makes a difference. So it sounds simple enough. Many organizations, depends on how they go about developing their ADPs, but it could become just a forgotten spreadsheet exercise rather than a real growth tool. So from where you stand, what are your thoughts on account development plans?
Yeah, it's something that's quite close to my heart actually. Quite often they become just admin exercise. You need to do an ADP. Okay, I'll do an ADP. All right, and then somebody will fill in an ADP, and they could put lots of crosses and noughts and dashes, but they filled an ADP. It's then what you do with it. So firstly, content. Content is normally, okay, customer X, they've got these products, they haven't got these products, so we need to sell them. That's not really particularly helpful. So we've got to make it a business, a document where you understand the customer's objectives and how then our products or the supplier's products can benefit the customer to achieve the objectives they're trying to achieve. And where I find them most useful is where it's not a list of things that we've done. It's a list of things that we are going to do when we're going to do them to achieve the aspirations that we're looking to do with those customers. So it's got to be a planning document. It's got to be a live planning document. It's got to be reviewed regularly. It's got to be, we talk a lot within Maintel about a three-legged salesperson. So that's your salesperson and your pre-sales person joined at the hips, talking to the customer. So that document needs to be owned by both of those and input into both of those.
Yeah.
It then needs their managers constantly checking in on them to make sure that the next steps are being followed, where appropriate, if the size of the customer is big enough. The exec sponsor for that customer within the company should be looking at it. But also, it should be a document that the customer can look at. And we shouldn't be afraid to share it with them, to say, look, these are our aspirations for our partnership together.
Yes.
So, we've recently modified within Maintel the ADP. We don't call it an ADP anymore because that carries its own baggage. We call it a growth acceleration plan, or an attack plan if it's for a new load. But it is very much driven around customer objectives, what they are trying to achieve, and where we can play in and how we play in.
Yeah, and I suppose the fact that it's up to say whether it's a hard copy, paper based, or a soft copy. That's for communicating to other people within the business, I suppose. But the actual plan, I would have thought, is kind of up here. What you really want is to be a living strategy and action plan, which evolves. I said, is here. but it does need to be communicated throughout the business. Hence the need for what would have been an ADP, but is now a GAP, from what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think you should in particular take a look at it, because the very last page of the growth acceleration plan is a whiteboard.
Right,
So,
some kind of diagram,
yeah,
effectively.
visual diagram of how we're going to get the customer from here to there, and that's your influence.
Super, excellent. Well, that's good. We're going to come back onto that shortly. So just hold that thought. Um, just a few more questions then on this. You have been in and around sales for it's over 20 years. It's got to be maybe 25.
Yeah.
You will have seen lots of high performing salespeople over that time, and maybe things have changed. But what are the behaviours that you would look for and you consistently see in high performing salesmen, salespeople, sales managers, sales leaders? What are the traits?
So, my favourite salespeople are the salespeople that talk as little as possible. First
Well,
and
I'm
foremost.
out. That's me. I'm gone. I'm done.
So the ones that actively listen and ask the questions in the right places are the ones that I think are successful. So they're being curious, and they're gaining information from the customer, because that initial when you're doing that discovery piece, you're not skilled enough to be able to say, oh well, I can do this for you, I can do that for you. Somebody else is better at doing that. Salespeople, but certainly within Maintel, the best salespeople are the ones that are able to glean from the customer what it is they're trying to achieve.
Right.
And then you bring in the smart people, and they can solutionize for you.
Right. Yeah.
But then it's around having the discipline, I think, to execute on the opportunity once the opportunity has been created. So it's having the discipline to follow through at the right places, and see that because you're foolish if you're working on one opportunity at a time, right? You're going to be if you're converting one in three, you need to be working a good 7 or 8 opportunities to get to
Yes.
where you need to be as an
Which is
individual.
a challenge, which is tough in and of itself.
So being disciplined about the sales process, so we have a sales process that we follow. And in my mind, if you follow the process, so if you've got your activity levels right, you follow the process, you'll get your results.
Yeah.
So it's about, first of all, zip it. Secondly, it's then about following process and being really disciplined around it.
Which it reminds me a little bit there of, I think it might have been Rafa Benitez many years ago, who kind of, if the team have done their due diligence before the game, you should just expect the team to go onto the pitch and play. I'm a little bit wary of getting onto football, because I think I see in the background behind you there that's is that a
Let's
West
not go
Ham?
there. Let's not go
Right, okay, so yeah, moving on rapidly.
I think the other one point that I missed out on was resilience. You need to be resilient. It's a tough marketplace. Customers have limited budgets to spend. Competition's fierce.
Yeah.
So you've got to be pretty resilient to survive in this marketplace as well.
Do you mean the ability there by resilience? Because we're not talking about technical network or electrical resilience here. You're talking about the ability to take the
No,
knocks, the slings and
yeah,
arrows. I think, as I say, we've been in sales a lot. The scars on our arms, and
yeah.
yet, yes, it is. It is in some respects. But isn't it the case? It would be the case in sport, wasn't it? You get your moments of glory. But there's also those moments which you say, well, you can't forget them. But those moments when you maybe at the bottom,
Yeah,
which is tough.
sometimes right? It's a long shot, and those ones are easier to take. Where you think where you think it was yours, and where you think you've done everything you possibly could have done. You've ticked all the boxes,
Yes.
and you get the Dear John. That's painful, and you need to be able to bounce back. You need to be able to review what you could have done differently, learn from it as much as you possibly can, but you then need to get back on the saddle and go again. And
Yes.
that's where the resilience
Yeah.
comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. No. 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 Definitely. No. Good advice there. Now, as may have been picked up during the conversation, as I say, we met last year. We've done a little bit of work together this year. So we worked together on the Maintel story, raising the skills of the people and the expectations of the business, I think, regarding using visual communications tools like whiteboards and flip charts. And I'm intrigued, perhaps you could just express here, what's been the main benefits to you and the business from that activity? What have you seen come
I
through?
think for me, so if I go back to probably October last year, we took the sales team off the road for a couple of days. We chucked them in a hotel room in a hotel, and it was all about the why mentor. How do we describe ourselves in the marketplace? When you put the proposition together, it's quite difficult to articulate it if you don't get it. So the first day was trying to get from them what they thought it was, and it was actually quite painful to watch. And that's on us, right? That's on us as a management team to put right. We've not given them the training, the skills to be able to articulate it. We've just layered products in without giving it the full story. But the other thing that I absolutely noticed at that point was the lack of confidence that our salespeople had in a bigger forum. And I think this goes back to what we talked about earlier in terms of the pandemic. They've got used to sitting like this, and it's really easy. I'm in my own comfort zone. So they've kind of lost that ability to stand in front of a customer and present to them. And I think what we've done with working with you is one is we've made it fun, right? We've got variation on the pitch that you've created for us, and we've depending on the
Yes.
situation, it's been varied, it's been humorized. But I think that the biggest thing I've taken from it that I'm seeing myself is the confidence levels of our salespeople. I walked in, so if I go back a couple of years more even, I remember doing when I first took this role on a similar scenario. I got everyone in a room, bit of product training. Right, I want everyone to come to the front of the room to one by one to present. Who's willing to do it? I think literally everyone ran out the door.
Yeah.
um,
Well, it's
and
a tough audience in front of your peers as
yeah,
well. I mean, that's the worst audience in many respects, but you think that's changed?
I so when we were doing the growth acceleration plan work, we did a big workshop in the office. I walked into one of the groups that was working on a particular customer, and they were expecting me. They were all stood at the front of the room, ready to present. And one of the people, I'm not going to name his name because I don't want to embarrass him, he was there at the front. He was one of the people that was trying to run out. He was trying to find the door out of that room 2 years ago. So it's done a lot to people's confidence. Just to have the confidence to pick up a pen and and ask for a whiteboard. It's not an easy thing to do unless
To me, it
um,
seems natural, but I've been doing it for 30 years, and that's said so. It's not the case, and one of the other what I liked about the work that we've done together this year is I love the fact that you've now have multiple flip charts and whiteboards in the
I
office,
was
which were basically non-existent
I was just
before.
going to say I was in our boardroom yesterday and I couldn't see the walls because there were so many whiteboards in there.
So I would say job done. That's a success. One of the best, one of the most enjoyable projects that I've done ever, let alone
I,
in a long time. So
yeah, everyone's got fond memories of what you did for us as well. So very much
super. That's
appreciate
fantastic. Final question then. You may have noticed I said the sponsor of the podcast for last series, this is series 3 and series 4, is In Connection. And on behalf of In Connection, I've been asking our podcast guests to name their most memorable corporate hospitality type event. So be it a partner event, maybe a kickoff or a president's club. You must have been on many of these over the years. Is there one that comes to mind? Your most memorable event?
my most memorable one was probably my first one, actually.
Yeah.
So I'd been in the company probably less than 6 months at this stage, and I got a cancellation. So I'd had a good start, but I hadn't been there a full year.
Right.
somebody couldn't go and there was a space on the trip. And my boss said, I'm putting you forward for that space. And I didn't really know what a president's club was back then. You know, it was,
Right.
I think I actually can't remember what they called the incentive at this particular company, but um, I'd been there, like I said, less than 6 months. I didn't really know many people within the organisation, and we were quite geographically dispersed. And a lot of the people that were going on the trip were based in our northern office. There
And
was
so the
very
top
few,
performers.
yeah. So anyway, it was a trip to Lillehammer in Norway. Never heard of,
Right.
I'd heard of
Okay.
Norway obviously, but never heard of
Right.
Lillehammer.
No, that's right.
Um,
Scary.
and I think what I liked about the event was there was two things I took away from it. One was this is amazing. I need to do this more often.
Mm.
How do I do this? So when you start talking to people, oh, well, this is my 50th year. This is I've been on every single one. You know, I've been here, I've been there, and you're kind of right. Okay, I need a piece of this. So there was a learning that
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
there's more to be had than a paycheck. The kudos that comes with it. But I think that the biggest thing that I've taken away from it was the impact it has on people.
Mm.
So we've run a trip for the last 2 years, um, and I know what it was like being the new person on the
Mm.
trip.
Mm.
So at Maintel, we do an incentive trip, which is for the whole organisation. So we don't just single out sales. We take members of staff from across the organisation. I didn't want it to be just a sales thing. But the thing that I've always tried to achieve on that trip, we've done it twice. The thing that I always try to achieve is to make sure absolutely everyone has an amazing time
Right.
and no one feels uncomfortable. And because I remember feeling uncomfortable, turning up, not really knowing anyone, but I was made to feel really, really welcomed by the person that was leading the trip. And that's one thing that I've really taken away from it. So now, you know, I very quickly figure out. So this time I knew the people I needed to make sure I put an arm around. There were people that weren't sure in the lead up to the trip.
Yes.
So I was having a call with them, reassuring them, making sure it's going to be a trip of a life. I had tears from people. You know, they enjoyed it that much. You know, and that's what that's probably what I took away from it. That
Yes.
it was just amazing, and being able to do that for other people now is equally amazing.
And lovely to think, as you said, it was the first trip that you went on. Clearly, the impact that it made is extraordinary. If you think you're basically taking lessons from that and applying them
Yeah,
today. Interesting also to me that it's not just sales. As you said, but you're not just sales, you're growth officer. So I
yeah,
suppose it's from people in different parts of the business. They're all contributing to the growth, but
yeah,
you probably have to have some
yeah,
criteria as to who is selected. But I think it's a wonderful part of the profession in many respects. That because you speak to people who are not involved, maybe in tech or not in sales, they're amazed when they find out that people can actually win trips to some incredible destinations. So I think it's a great part of the culture, and my
yeah,
feeling is it's a great investment. And clearly, from the example that you're showing there, it can the experience itself in connection. As I said, the sponsors they have a phrase, they say memories that matter, and again, it does sound as if that's what you were trying to do here, is to instill, give these
100%.
people an event, give them a memory that does matter, and it's lovely
Yeah,
to be able to do that in today's corporate world.
100%. And look, you know, like I said, we take people from across the organisation. Some have never experienced, you
Mm,
know,
correct. A trip like that,
yeah, there's
it's
no experience.
mind blowing.
Yeah. So, and actually, the value, the ongoing value, is incredible. So, I heard so many people at the airport on the way home, even though they were a little bit blurry-eyed after a few heavy nights. Um, I now need to figure out how I'm back here next time. You know, so
Yes,
the
yes, and it was
motivation.
Marbella, wasn't it? Was it Marbella
Yeah,
this year?
that's right.
So Marbella was my first trip actually. It was my first Honours Club week-long trip. Prior to that, about 5 months before that, they'd done a quarterly incentive to Amsterdam, which was my first incentive trip. More than that, I was 22 years of age. It was my first time abroad. I'd never even, coming from Swansea as I did. I think I'd been to Cardiff 3 times and London twice on school trips. So the possibility of going to Amsterdam for a start was mind blowing. But then Marbella, and I can tell you it was the Don Carlos Hotel in Marbella, which I believe is still there
Yes, it is.
now. And that would have been, say, 1987. So we're
So
talking
the Don
nearly
Carlos
40 years ago.
Hotel, that's the one on the beach, right? On the seafront.
I think it was. As I say, I was that
Um,
blurry-eyed myself. I'm not sure I went in the sea. There was a nice pool there, but it's a
and
classic
they've now got a
hotel
beach
there.
club at the front of that hotel, which is
Right,
where we had our first lunch, funny enough.
right, fantastic. So, hey, listen, we could wax lyrical about that all day. Thanks ever so much for joining us
Thank you for
on
having
the
me.
podcast. Much appreciated, and we'll have you back on at some point in the not too distant future, I am sure. So, Yogesh Patel, Chief Growth Officer of Maintel. Thanks ever so much for joining us. See you again soon.
Cheers, Mark. Thank you.